Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. My name's GBay99. I hope you all are having a wonderful day. Today, we're back with another video where we're going to be doing something pretty fun today. We're going to be talking about what makes a good champion, as in a well-designed champion in League of Legends. This is going to be another one of those videos where I try and humanize myself a little bit. So rather than just seeming like a toxic rager who constantly complains about anything and everything that doesn't go my way in game, we're going to instead establish a bit more of a baseline for what it is that I look for when I'm talking about League of Legends. This is going to be another video that's made in collaboration with ProGuides.com. They're doing the editing again. ProGuides, for those of you who don't know, is a great resource for tips, tricks, and in-depth strategy on League of Legends. And if we're just speaking frankly, editing is probably my least favorite part about being a YouTuber. So go show them some love for supporting the channel and everything. A link to their site and a free trial for their service will be in the description down below. Thanks again, ProGuides. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into the video. So, what makes a good champion? Well, just a reminder, we're talking about what makes a well-designed champion here, not what makes someone literally good in the meta for whenever you're watching this video. But getting into this, I would say that if we're oversimplifying things, there's two main pillars that you should think about when you're talking about what makes a well-designed champion. Firstly, a champion should have unique strengths that only they can provide a team. They should be able to do something that no other champion does, provide a role that's not easily filled by anyone else, whether that's with some sort of big, special, fantastic ultimate that they can use in team fights, or maybe they just have an unusual amount of damage in the early game laning phase. All champions, though, should strive to not just simply be carbon copies of each other, and that's kind of obvious. This is something that, for the most part, Riot is generally very good at. The only instance where they failed at this massively was with the old pre-rework Graves, where they had to rework Graves because he was way too similar to Lucian. But secondly, there should also always be a way to outplay any champion regardless of who you pick, as long as you pick an actual champion in the role that you're playing and not doing something trolly. Every champion should have some sort of weakness that can be used to exploit them if they're played against properly, and this is the part where sometimes Riot fails. Looking at some examples, I would say that Ezreal, or even AD carries in general, are good examples of well-designed champions that fall into these categories for the most part. I mean, looking at Ezreal specifically, he is entirely skill-oriented in terms of his kit. He has loads of skill shots that he has to land. He has an escape, so he can be a very slippery AD carry when he's in meta and provide a pretty ridiculous amount of damage to a team that picks him. But he's also an AD carry, which means that he's incredibly squishy. If he has no escape, or if he uses it poorly, or if he just gets caught out or whatever, then he will get blown up in an instant and made completely useless. So while he can deal a lot of damage and carry games on his own, he also has a pretty big glaring weakness, and if he's misused, he will be punished very, very hard. I think AD carries in general, for the most part, are good examples of well-designed champions where the only issue they have is that first point where not all of them are completely unusual compared to all the others. Like Ezreal, for instance, I mean, he doesn't bring that much unusual stuff to the table compared to other AD carries out there. He brings poke damage, obviously, but a lot of different AD carries, nowadays at least, can poke all the time. And the only other thing that's a little bit unusual about him is his weird scaling, since he doesn't go for a traditional Infinity Edge build and instead rushes Triforce. But anyway, you can see the point. This is an example of a champion that I love to see in game. I, for the most part, will never complain about a champion like Ezreal or most AD carries unless they're buffed to a point where they're absolutely ridiculous. If I get outplayed by one of these champions, it feels like that I got outplayed, not that the champion is broken. Now let's compare that Ezreal design to somebody like Azir, who I would say is on the other end of the spectrum, being much more of a failure. Azir has a big problem in that he is too good at everything. He's a really good idea. I mean, I love his concept. I love the idea behind him. He has awesome lore and all that jazz, but at the end of the day, his kit is way too difficult to balance just from how good it is. He has a pretty ridiculous amount of damage. The damage that he deals is strangely consistent. Normally, mid laners deal burst damage and with one big combo, but he deals damage as consistently as an AD carry. Despite the fact that he deals damage so consistently, he also has a fair amount of poke and a fair amount of burst damage in small spurts. And again, I mean, a champion like this who deals all this ridiculous amount of damage is normally balanced around being handicapped a little bit, where it's really easy to kill them, they're really squishy or easy to catch out or something. But between his escape and his ultimate, he's also incredibly difficult to lock down and finish off. I mean, he just has way too much of everything right now. This is why Riot is looking to tweak or rework him currently. He's simply too good at everything, which I guess that does make him a little bit unusual, and it gives him a role to fill that no other mid laner can fill, being absolutely phenomenal at everything, but that's obviously not a healthy way to do it. There's simply nothing you can do if you play against an Azir when Azir is in meta, and if the Azir player is good enough. He can outplay you every time, and there's not too much that you can do when playing against him. There's no counterplay. Riot has actually said in the past that this is one of the things that they really strive for in an attempt to distance themselves from Dota 2. Now, I'm not a huge Dota player, so I apologize for any inaccuracies from here on out, but as far as I know, a huge portion of playing Dota is the hero select, their version of champion select, right? The drafting, where you're picking what heroes you're going to play and attempting to counterpick your opponents. In Dota, with the way things are balanced, you might end up getting into a game with a massive deficit from square one if you get outpicked or if you get counterpicked super hard. There's a lot of really big counterpicks in Dota. Again, I'm not sure if this is exactly how the game is balanced anymore, but this is at least how the game used to be. And Riot has said that they don't ever want League of Legends to turn into that. That's something that they really want to distance themselves from, where maybe some champions can beat others and maybe some champions are stronger than others in certain points, and you can kind of counterpick a little bit here and there, but they never want you to go into a game hopeless that you'll never be able to outskill a worse player. Now, let me be clear here for a moment. I don't mean to suggest that everything in League of Legends should be balanced around everybody being able to 1v1 each other. There are some ways that you can introduce counterplay beyond just giving everybody skill shots and making everyone possible to outplay each other like that by making similar champions or something. A great way to balance some champions out, for instance, is by making them really, really good at some points in the game, almost invincible, but making them really bad at other points in the game. Stuff like late game scalers that you see with Tryndamere is a perfect example. Tryndamere can get to a point in the late game where if he's farmed enough and fed, you basically auto lose the game. With how much damage he deals and how he'll just continue scaling like a monster, it's almost impossible to kill him. He will outdamage everyone and the game is basically over. But that insane late game is obviously balanced out by him having a very poor early game and mid game, where a good player can punish him early on and prevent him from hitting that crazy scaling. Another example of this is someone like Gangplank. Gangplank might have the worst laning in all of League of Legends for the solo lanes, but he also has one of the most insane late games, both in his split push and his teamfight ability, but it's all balanced out as long as he has that really poor laning. I mean, that's one of the things where some champions get out of hand, like tanks that I love to complain about. That's one of the problems with tanks. If they don't have that really poor laning, then there's nothing to balance out their invincible late game. The important thing to note here, though, is there are very few, maybe not any moments where if you're playing against a Gangplank in lane that it's going to be a close matchup, where if you try and 1v1 each other, then it's going to go either way. I mean, for the most part, every level is going to be decided by who's the better scaling champion at that point in the game if you try and fight, but it's still balanced out because there's clear advantages and clear disadvantages to the different champions that are being played in that matchup, and that counterplay still exists. Let's get into some more nuanced examples, though, and talk about an example for a champion who, in my opinion, does almost everything wrong, and that's going to be Malzahar. Sorry, Malzahar mains. See, my problem with Malzahar is he is an example of a champion where there is pretty much nothing you can do when you're playing against him all throughout the game. And we're not even going to talk about his stupid passive too much, where he just gets to be invincible forever until someone damages him or anything like that, but mostly I want to talk about his ultimate. His ultimate is one of the most annoying abilities to play against in the game. The only option for counterplay against it is building a QSS, which is kind of counterplay, but that can really mess up a champion's build path and power spikes and everything. I don't know if I would say that's healthy counterplay play for how to play against him. The problem with Malzahar is he has this huge range on his ultimate. His range is even larger if you include the flash, and if he flash ults you, he can almost always guarantee killing you, whether that's him comboing you on his own, or if he just has one teammate nearby. If he has one teammate nearby and he ults you, he's basically guaranteeing that you're gonna die, and there's nothing you're gonna be able to do. You're gonna be dead before you get out of the crowd control, which that isn't necessarily always a problem. Like, suppressions in League of Legends can be balanced pretty well. An example for a champion with good suppression mechanics, I would argue, is Skarner. Skarner has an ultimate that's very similar to Malzahar's, where it can lock you down. You can just end up getting killed if you're caught out with his ultimate and he drags you into his team. And again, it's a suppression, it's long CC that he can do a lot with his team while you're crowd controlled. But Skarner's ultimate is a lot different in that it doesn't set up for guaranteed kills unless he has at least one teammate nearby, where it doesn't deal any damage. Just getting caught out with a Skarner ultimate is not automatic death, and if it is automatic death, then generally speaking, that's because you stood way too far forward in a team fight as an AD carry or something. Skarner's ultimate is much more about team play, and it's a lot easier to play around since it has a much smaller range. Even if he flashes forward or uses his W, it's not a huge range, it's a melee range ultimate. Where you compare that with Malzahar, his ultimate, he can basically combo you with his other basic abilities and one-shot you himself. He doesn't need to think at all while using this point-and-click ability that you can't do anything against. I think that's really the criteria for when I complain about champions, when I say a champion is frustrating to play against, or when I say a champion is really, really bad and unhealthy for the game. I think champions are unhealthy for the game when it feels like there's actually nothing you can do to outskill an opponent in the entire period of a match. That's really where champion balance is at its best, when you see examples like Jax, where every mechanic they have has some sort of form of counterplay. That's a great example of a well-balanced champion and well-designed champion, but there are still a fair amount of champions in League of Legends where it really feels like there aren't glaring weaknesses to them, and that's what I like to complain about the most. Anyway, if you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you very much for listening to me ramble. I hope you enjoyed it. I kind of like making these rambly videos, even if they are a little bit disorganized and maybe do have some strong opinions that I'm sure plenty of people will disagree with me for. Plenty of Malzahar mains probably going to be hating me in the comments, but either way, thank you very much for making it to the end of this video if you're listening to my voice now. I will see you all tomorrow, but until then, thank you very much for watching, good luck in solo queue, and have a wonderful day.